All right, next fight we have here is Charles Oliveira and Arman Hammer Tsarukyan. So right now we have the odds: Charles Oliveira plus 195, courtesy of DraftKings. Tsarukyan minus 238. So this is one of the most compelling and competitive betting fights on this whole entire card to me. This one is just the most difficult to predict out of all the fights that we've covered thus far up to this point for this episode. And yeah, it is fucking tough. It's tough because Tsarukyan's coming off a huge win over Beneil Dariush, just knocking him out in round one pretty emphatically. Unfortunately, I'm another Dariush guy. I admire him and like him, but man, he really took a lot of hype from Dariush with that and maybe even ended his chances at competing for the belt. And Oliveira is coming off of a rough loss. I believe his last fight was against Makhachev. Let me look that up right quick. Maybe it wasn't. But I think that's why people are sleeping on him right now, because his last fight was a loss. But man, oh, excuse me. Wow, they're actually both coming off of beating the shit out of Beneil Dariush. That's yeah, Beneil Dariush got TKO'd by Charles Oliveira June last year. Shout out to the article readers. That was one of the very first articles I ever did for Better and Green, was UFC 289, which I might add, I correctly predicted in that article that Oliveira was the underdog at the time and that he would beat Dariush and by TKO. So you won some money off that if you read it. So yeah, TKO'd him June last year. That's what Oliveira did. And Tsarukyan, I'm pretty sure put him out, unfortunately, for Dariush out cold not that long ago. I want to say back in December last year. Let me double check that. So
that one was really recent.
Yeah, December last year, he KO'd him. So they're both coming off KO, TKO wins over Dariush in their last fight. Before that, yes, that was when Oliveira lost the belt to Makhachev. And this is tough. This is very tough because Oliveira on paper does seem like the superior grappler, but what gives me fits is Tsarukyan was the first guy to, even though he lost the unanimous decision to Makhachev, Tsarukyan, let me put this into perspective for you. Tsarukyan's UFC debut was Islam Makhachev. Imagine making your first fight appearance in the UFC and fucking Islam Makhachev's the first guy you go up against. And he was also the first guy to take Makhachev to a hard-fought decision. I'm not talking about like an ass-whipping decision like Makhachev was accustomed to, where he just dominated pillar to post Davey Hamos, where he just absolutely dominated Nick Lentz, where he just dominated Chris Wade. Tsarukyan actually took Makhachev to a close decision that some people would make an honest argument Tsarukyan maybe should have had the nod. So that is pretty damn impressive that Tsarukyan was able to do that in his UFC debut. And after that, Olivier Aubin-Mercier, Davey Hamos, Matt Frivola, Christos Gallegos, Joe Alvarez. Other than Joe Alvarez and Olivier Aubin, nothing crazy on his record. Did drop a unanimous decision to Mateusz Gamrot, another bright prospect in that division right now. Beats the shit out of Demir Isgalam, TKO over Joaquim Silva, and then I said Beneil Dariush. Actually, this is kind of giving me a little bit of pause now that I'm looking at it, so I might have to change this, but we're going to keep rolling with it because, I don't know, it's tough because Tsarukyan's a guy coming with a lot of hype. He's coming off a lot of momentum. He's a younger guy, not a lot of miles, not a lot of wear and tear. You know, impressive 3-fight win streak. Right now, Oliveira's only on a 1-fight win streak. But, man, he's just very well-rounded. He's got power. He's got a nice mix of TKO, KO finishes. Surprisingly, no sub finishes. He does have really good grappling, like I said, to the point where he can stand and hold his own against Makhachev, but no sub wins of his own in the UFC. But he's a very well-rounded guy. And so is Oliveira. Oliveira obviously gets a lot of credentials and praise for his BJJ, his elite BJJ sub game. But he also has some pretty good striking, some creative dynamic knees, some punches, some kicks. Very well-rounded in that regard. Some things that leave me concerned, though. Oliveira in every fight gets dropped. It's a meme, but it's also a well-established thing at this point. It's like he doesn't start fighting until he gets dropped. He got dropped against Chandler. That was like his wake-up call. got dropped against, I believe, Gaethje. Let me double check that. But yeah, he gets dropped in every fucking fight. And then he's like, oh, yeah, that's right. I'm in the UFC and I just got dropped. Now here's time to pull it out of my ass, is what it feels like. So yeah, Gaethje dropped him. Poirier dropped him. Chandler dropped him. He still came back to win all of those fights. Finished Dustin Poirier rear naked. Justin Gaethje finished him rear naked. Michael Chandler TKO'd him. So the guy has a lot of finishes over elite talent. Elite talent. Gaethje, Poirier, Chandler, Tony Ferguson. That was like Tony Ferguson on his second loss. So by that time, everybody was like, maybe Tony's done. But it wasn't like it was when you beat Tony on his 3, 4, 5 fight losing skid. There was still a little bit of respect there. Submitting Kevin Lee, I'm not too crazy about that, even though I'm a Kevin Lee guy. I got to call it how it is. Jared Gordon, Nick Lentz, David Tamer, not really impressive. Jim Miller, choked out Jim Miller. We talked about him earlier.
Yeah.
So this is tough. This is a really damn tough fight because two well-rounded elite guys, really good matchmaking with this to see, does Charles get to, have a chance to reclaim his belt in a rematch with Makhachev? Does Tsarukyan warrant a rematch with Makhachev? Both men put themselves in prime position with a win to face Makhachev, who's beaten them both so far again, in a rematch. So there's a lot on the line for both of them. And it's just like, I'm not trying to do the MMA math to get me to go with Oliveira. And it's like, it's tough. It's fucking tough because, like I said, the line, I feel like it should be closer. Minus 238 for Tsarukyan, plus 195 for Oliveira. It feels like a pick'em to me. I get why Arman has the youth edge, but other than the youth edge, why is he getting such a huge bump? I don't understand it. Oliveira KO TKO plus 800. Oliveira sub plus 400. Oliveira decision plus 850. Tsarukyan KO TKO plus 130. Tsarukyan sub plus 700. Tsarukyan decision plus 300. You're not really getting crazy odds unless you're going with Oliveira on this. And I'm thinking, gosh, damn, this is so tough. It's so tough.
You mean I'm thinking and then make your decision?
Yeah. Yeah, what do you think? What do you got?
So, I didn't realize how good Charles Oliveira was. Like,
right.
Dude is like in the top, I would say, all time. Great. Just all around fighters. Like the sub game, everything about Charles Oliveira really impressed me. Like you were saying, his level of competition is just insane. Undefeated from 2018 to 2022. When I went in, I thought Arman was going to be the pick. And it was really, I saw the odds. I thought they made sense. I did my research. I'm with you. I feel like this should be way closer. And then the thing that stuck out to me is Charles Oliveira, like, doesn't lose. Like, this dude rarely ever loses. But what is his weakness? Who does he lose to? Is Makhachev and that Russian wrestling style that just, they're not going to let you do all your crazy BJJ stuff. They're going to get on top of you, and they're not going to try to engage with a bunch of the, like, submission, grappling type stuff. They just want to keep pressure on you and pound away. And I think that's one of the things he said about Tsarukyan is that he didn't have any sub work. I don't think he's going to try to do any subs with Oliveira. I think he's just going to focus on getting him down, pressuring him, and beating him. That's the blueprint to beat Oliveira. And that's kind of how Arman's built. He's built like that. The Sterling fight, I think we were talking about earlier, is like a fight that's coming with Calvin Kattar, who has the injury, and now you're going to be fighting a wrestler. Kind of feels like handpicked for him. This seems like a really close fight, but I think the worst type of fighter for Oliveira is a guy like Tsarukyan and Islam Makhachev.
Seriously, because he lost to Islam by arm triangle, but he beat Gaethje with a rear naked, Poirier with a rear naked, Kevin Lee with a guillotine, Tamer with an anaconda, Jim Miller with a rear naked, but then Ricardo Lamas choked him out with a guillotine, Anthony Pettis choked him out with a guillotine, Max Holloway TKO'd him, but that was a weird injury, Cup KO'd him, Cerrone KO'd him, Jim Miller knee barred him. So he needs to rematch Jim Miller because right now they're 1-1. They need to have a trilogy to fucking settle this. And they both subbed each other. That's an interesting fact I just came across. So after this, regardless, give Jim Miller his last fight. But yeah, like, It's tough. It's tough because if he's not subbing you, he's getting subbed. I mean, obviously he can be TKO'd. Paul Felder did it with elbows, and everybody, like I said, drops him within the first minute of this fight until he wakes up and starts fucking doing something. But I don't know. You do make a valid point about that Russian grappling style. I mean, Islam did get the sub win, but for the most part, it is focused more on control and position over submission
Right.
for the great majority of the time, unless you just see something glaringly obvious it's safe to go for, open up.
That's why I feel like it could
But
even be a decision in this one. I just feel like it could be so you can just taking him down and controlling so much. I'm a little surprised the line set at 1.5. It looks like Vegas is leaning the over there. And also looking at Vegas, Tsarukyan's only got 19% of the bets, but about 34% of the money. So we would be on Vegas' side too if we're on Tsarukyan with the 34%.
what about, because this is where I feel like you could really get some value on Oliveira, like I felt like with the Dariush thing, but fuck. What about if you did Tsarukyan? Because I am curious now about him getting a sub, though. And it would be, like I said, his first sub in the UFC. But if he's, I'm thinking of like a club and sub situation like Yuri Glover, where he like sets it up with the striking. And most people, when they drop Oliveira in that first minute or first round, they don't follow him down. Like Poirier didn't follow him, Gaethje didn't. I don't believe Chandler did. Most people stay standing, or like they try to, as safely as they can, go in with the punches to finish it up, but then they disengage with the grappling when it looks like Oliveira is going to try to play guard or some shit.
Right.
I think Tsarukyan, if he drops him,
Jumps
isn't
on
going to
him.
be afraid. Yeah.
Right. Agreed.
He's not going to be afraid. He's either going to keep going for the KO TKO or he's going to hunt for the sub. And when he's rocked is when I feel like he'd be most prone to getting the sub, because I get there is a lot of training instinct that puts you into autopilot, which is why you see a lot of guys who get fucking flatlined and the ref jumps on top of them. They're trying to fucking guillotine the ref or put the ref in a leg lock just because it's so ingrained in their muscle memory. But that's when you have the best chance of, I think, locking up a sub on Oliveira is when he doesn't have his wits about him and shit. So
Yeah.
what about like Saruki and KO TKO sub together? What's that looking like?
Plus 100.
That's not bad. That's tempting. Because I think Tsarukyan has something to prove. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. He wants to make a statement. Same for Oliveira. Yes, it can go decision, but I think both guys are trying to prove something. Both guys are trying to go for the kill on this. Neither one's going to want to play it safe. Like I said, there's so much on the line. Each one of them desperately wants to get that win against Makhachev, especially now that he has the belt. They want the belt, and they want to avenge their loss against Makhachev. So they're both tough, but nobody's wanting it to go to decision. So I think to wrap it up, even though it's fucking difficult, I'm probably going to fucking regret this. I feel like in my gut, I'm going to regret not choosing Oliveira. But at the end, somebody's got to be – everybody's career ends at some point, right? And as great of a story as it is and as great of a fighter as he is, he's already at this point had a legendary run, though. Oliveira's had a legendary run. He's got a lot of miles. This is the crazy thing about MMA. You look at how many fights they've had, and then you look at the age, the physical age, and you're always shocked. Oliveira's only 34. He's only 34, but he's been in the UFC. People forget. He started in the UFC in 2010. He made his debut in 2010. So he's been in the UFC for a long fucking time.
Yes.
A long time. And he's only 34. But he's had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32. At least 32. And that's me scrolling rapidly. 32 fucking fights in the UFC. That's a lifetime in this sport.
Yeah.
From 2010 to 2015 is a lifetime, let alone 2010 to 2024 right now is a lifetime and a half, plus 2 carry the 3. And it's sad, But very rarely do MMA careers also end with an everybody lived happily ever after and they never had any worries. Unfortunately, the common denominator and what most likely happens in MMA is guys and girls stay way past their prime and way past when they should. I hope that's not the case for Charles Oliveira, but everybody's career got to end sometime, and we might be looking at another situation like that on the next fight that we're coming up to shortly on this card. So all that being said, to move on, yeah, I like Tsarukyan double KO TKO sub at a plus 100 right now. I'd want to lock that in before the scales tip basically negate that fucking profit that you would make on it. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, man. Yeah, and as we were talking to, I was just thinking about Charles. That's why we're seeing so much money pouring on Charles. It's because he's been around for 14 years. That's a name everybody knows. If you're just a casual MMA fan, everybody knows Charles Oliveira. They know he's just the Brazilian sub guy. So they think, oh, I don't even know Arman, newer guy to the UFC. They don't know him. They don't know his story. So everybody's throwing their money on Charles, and that's when that's the situation. I feel like you always want to be on the other side because that's how Vegas makes their money off of people that don't really know, but they want to be part of it. So we're on the
Valid
right side of
points.
that one.
Very valid points. I didn't think about that. Very true, especially with this being a huge card. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. This is a huge card. Obviously, 300's gaining a lot of traction, even with the casual audience. People are wanting to go to B-dubs, watch the fights at buddies' houses, viewing parties, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, I think you make a very valid point there. I had not considered. People probably are just like, oh, Charles Oliveira. I've heard of that guy in the past 3 years. He was one of the first guys that Kevin Lee fight. People don't know Kevin Lee, but they might even remember that fight because that was the last sporting event, I believe, that took place before the fucking world shut down. So he's got a lot working in his favor in terms of that name recognition. But how long can you hold on to that?
Right. Yeah, I love it. I think I will, man, that decision still really worries me. And Vegas is even saying not to worry about it, to take an early ending. But I can just see, especially because Arman got screwed that one time by decision. I feel like he really doesn't want it to get there.
But BJJ, guys, if it's going to decision, it's because Oliveira's on his back. And I know that there are some wonky ass decisions, but if it's going to decision, it's going to be because Arman is control time. And I know control time in the significant strikes, as I just mentioned, is always contentious and you don't know from fight to fight. I think it's going to be enough of a statement with a guy like Tsarukyan that you won't be able to deny it. Like other guys, you'll be able, like a Walter Walker, of course. Like there's nothing impressive about his takedowns and laying on somebody.
Yeah.
Tsarukyan, yeah, it's not exactly looking for the sub unless it's there and it's kind of safe because it's position over submission. But he's at least making it entertaining. He's at least advancing position. He's at least tying up arms or tying up legs or scrambling or preventing scrambles or doing fucking something,
Yeah.
He's at least doing something. And one thing is for damn sure, for all of its faults, and this is something people bitch about, but I mean, it's true. BJJ off your back in the modern UFC is not the way to go. You'll lose every time. Unless you actually hit that fucking unless you, excuse me, not arm triangle, unless you actually hit that triangle or hit that guillotine or whatever the fuck you're going for off your back, you're not going to win. You're going to easily lose on the scorecards because all the judges are going to see is just you on your back. It doesn't matter how many subs you're throwing up if they don't actually, result in a finish.
Right. I think I would rather just take the small payout. I'm just gonna do the Tsarukyan money line. I know.
Fair enough. I get it. It's fair enough.
It's because I can see every way. I can see it happening in all three methods.
Right.
So
I'm just going to stick with KO TKO sub double at plus 100 to try to take the sting off a little bit.
I like it. I don't blame you one bit.
I just think once again, I get where you're coming from with the decision, but I'll also offer you this, and this is the last thing that I'll try to sway your mind. You've been seeing those shirtless pics of Arman? I want to know who his chemist is. I want the deets. If you know who his chemist is, get me in touch. That's all I'm saying. I'm looking for a nice little protocol.
You better start listening to the Better in Green podcast. You will not regret it. Trust me, trust me, trust me. And hey, I'm Dean Blandino.
Welcome to Better in Green, eh? To Better in Green, eh? To Better in Green, eh? Listen in and cash out. That's what it's all about. Come on, let's make cash now. We always on spot and we cover all spot from the bottom to the top. Hey, shout out to Ethan, shout out to Wyatt, shout out to Ben. Welcome to our podcast, Better in Green.